Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching News in Depth. 4 years have passed since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine and the great exodus of Ukrainians. And to talk about it, here we're joined by our TVP World's very own Kazimierz Łysiak. Kazik, hello. Now, tell me, how do you remember these early days, especially in the context of refugees who were flowing in great numbers into Poland?
Hello, Maciej. Before all of that began, I'm sure you remember this atmosphere of tension that we all felt in the newsroom. We were both there 4 years ago. And leading up to the actual full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, we had these night shifts. So us reporters would come in at 10 p.m. and sit all night long in the newsroom, watching various feeds, Twitter, Reddit, all these kinds of websites where we could see whether something was happening. And until
hoping that the worst wouldn't happen.
Exactly. And to be honest, until the very last moments, I think many of us refused to believe that something would happen. Even 3 days prior to the war breaking out, when Biden said that former US President Joe Biden said that Russia would invade Ukraine, still some of us refused to believe that would happen. But then, of course, it did. And I remember that very vividly because I was actually supposed to have a night shift on that night from the February 23rd to 24th. I switched with my friend because I was already so tired from all these night shifts before, but I couldn't sleep. So I was sitting down on my phone, constantly looking at various feeds of what was going on. And then suddenly we saw the speech by Russian President Vladimir Putin announcing the so-called special military operation. And I was one of the first people to actually call our managing editor at the time and tell him, hey, we think it's starting, it's time to move. And all of us were gathering in the newsroom in the middle of the night. It was 4 a.m. Everyone jumping, calling each other, and it was all hands on deck. No one was thinking about any sort of schedules or shifts. It was just who can come in, let's do it, because it is one of the most consequential moments for all of Europe. I remember that we worked until anyone could have strength to stand on their own. At some point, someone told me, go to home, you need some sleep after 24 hours of working. And then after I woke up, I got the message from one of our bosses that it's time to head to the border to see what's going on there.
What was going on there?
Well, it was a sight that I've never seen in my life before. It was one of the greatest humanitarian tragedies in my life that I've seen with my own eyes. I remember thousands of Ukrainians flowing through the border into Poland, and it was really a sight difficult to describe. It was thousands of mostly women and children running from war. You could see on their faces that they went through some really difficult moments already. These were mostly, like I said, women and children, because most of the men stayed back and fought and defended the country. So these were mothers with the sons, daughters, often carrying nothing else than just a backpack. You can actually see some of the pictures that
now,
I took
before we take a look at the pictures you've taken, I'd like us to listen to a soundbite we have of the United Nations Refugee Coordinator for the Ukraine situation in Poland. Let's give it a listen.
Let's listen.
In my over 20 years of working with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, I've never seen such a demonstration of solidarity. The Polish people, the Polish government, local community organizations, volunteers, the private sector, all stood together to receive about 4.5 million Ukrainian refugees pouring across the border in those first 3 months. And that solidarity today remains. The situation is more complex 4 years on. And as we sit here in the studio today, Benjamin, there are 10 million Ukrainians forcibly displaced globally. About 4 million inside Ukraine, another 6 million who've fled across borders, 1 million here in Poland, as you mentioned. But the situation is challenging, to say the least, as we sit here today.
So the UN Refugee Coordinator, Kevin Allen, is talking about really big numbers, right? 10 million displaced Ukrainians in total. But, I'm wondering about these particular images that got stuck in your mind? Things that you remember that will stay with you probably forever from these early days of the Russian invasion.
Right, so there are a couple of things. First, I would say that while this was truly one of the biggest tragedies that I've experienced on this scale in my life, and I've seen this big tragedy on the faces of these Ukrainians who were fleeing from war, there was also another aspect to it all. This was this enormous relief effort from Poles. You can see some of the pictures right now from the scenes when I was reporting on it at the border. There were hundreds and hundreds of cars, Poles rushing to the border, even my friends calling me, knowing that I'm there, and saying, hey, what do you need? What do they need, the Ukrainians who were there? The situation was changing rapidly. At first, some of the most needed objects, some of the most needed things that these Ukrainians needed were clothes, because many of them left just like that immediately in the middle of the night when the war started. Then there was so many clothes because people were just coming, ordinary Poles, without any sort of, not taking part in any humanitarian organization. They just decided it's the right thing to do. We need to help these people who are in need. They would bag as many clothes as they could, food, shampoo, whatever they could, and they drove to the border and just dumped it on the ground there. There were volunteers who were organizing this help, delivering it to those who needed it. So it was really an amazing sight to see. In this tragedy, there was a great sense of hope. And this was incredible, of this brotherhood, of this unity, that it doesn't matter who these people are, what's the political situation right now, what we need to do is help. And this was on a massive scale, really a lot of Poles coming over to the border to help. Also to just take some of these Ukrainians and get them further into the country, because most of them came there on foot. And they had no idea what to do next, where to go. Some had families in Poland or other places in Europe. They needed transportation. And this was really a massive humanitarian relief effort that was organized really from the ground up by just regular Poles.
Right.
Now,
well, Kazi, let me interrupt you here. You're talking about these sentiments of hope, of solidarity with refugees. But I remember there was something else too. There was fear, there was uncertainty whether Russian troops will stop there, on the front lines. Well, there was basically no front line back then in Ukraine, right? The Russian troops, but they were advancing pretty fast. Now, the American president issued an assurance for Poland and for the rest of NATO. Let's listen to that now.
American forces are here to defend NATO allies. Yesterday, I met with the troops that are serving alongside our Polish allies to bolster NATO's frontline defenses. The reason we want to make clear is their movement on Ukraine don't even think about moving on one single inch of NATO territory. We have sacred obligation. We have a sacred obligation under Article 5 to defend each and every inch of NATO territory.
The sacred obligation that didn't apply to Ukraine, of course, because Ukraine's not part of NATO. And yet, well, you said that it was mostly women and children that you saw on the border. There were men too, and they, in big numbers, of course with women and children as well, decided to return to the war-torn country. Wasn't that surprising to you?
It was actually surprising, and it was an incredible sight to see, very moving as well. But before we get to that, I just want to comment very quickly on Joe Biden and his speech, the former US president. Of course, a very different Joe Biden then than he is nowadays. And honestly, I was at this speech as well in Warsaw when he came there. I reported on it as well. And it was really a great sight to see. It was really reassuring, not only to me, but to a lot of Poles. This great sense of unity from NATO, from the United States, the biggest guarantor of peace. We felt relief that, we have the United States on our side. with former US President Joe Biden so strongly wording that all NATO territory would be defended, every inch of NATO territory would be defended. But before Joe Biden spoke, there was someone else who gave a speech just before him at that very same night. It was former ambassador to Poland, US Ambassador Mark Brzeziński, and he also started his speech by quoting a sign that was at the Przemyśl train station. That's the first train station at the border between Poland and Ukraine, through which many of these refugees went through. And this sign said, "Tutaj jesteście bezpieczni," which means here you are safe. And this was really a powerful message as well from the former US ambassador, saying, here you are safe, in Poland you are safe. And that was also a message that we got from the United States. You are also safe because of us. But coming back to what you said about Ukrainians moving back to Ukraine, I want to show you one photo that I took when I was at the border. Hopefully you'll see it right there on the screen. Now this is a photo which I took from a booth inside the border crossing between Poland and Ukraine. What you can see there is the back of a Ukrainian man who is actually saying his final, what could be his final goodbyes to his fiancée, as they were living in Poland, and he was actually coming back to Ukraine to fight. And it was really a very moving scene, which I took a picture from behind this door because I did not want to intrude on this very private moment of theirs, where they were all in tears, and she was saying goodbye to him, knowing that he's going to fight for his country. Really, this is probably the image that will stay with me forever. It was really moving to see this courage from this Ukrainian man, and these tears that flowed on both their cheeks, not knowing if they will see each other again. These were really, really moving scenes, and this is what I remember this border crossing to be like. It was both a place of great courage and of great determination and of great unity, and also a place of great tragedy and a site of real powerlessness in the face of the war launched by Russia.
Poland has been dubbed, was dubbed a humanitarian superpower back then by the very ambassador you have just mentioned, Mark Brzeziński. But mostly it was, as you say, it was the effort of common people, right? That were just going to the border to help the refugees. Now, do you think that Poland draw conclusions from these early days of the invasion, and is now better prepared for such occurrences if indeed something as bad happens in the future?
Well, I think it was a great lesson to everyone, not only in Poland, but also in all of Europe. It was a great test and a great lesson. I think it's a test that Poles have passed, for sure. And I think even though it was mostly, a not coordinated relief effort from ordinary Poles, there was also quite a lot of support from the government for Ukrainians, namely programs for Ukrainian refugees where they would get special treatment, they could come here to get asylum. There were various ways that the government...
That came much later, if I'm not mistaken.
It has, but still, there was support from the government for sure, even though most of it came from ordinary Poles. And there were voices back then, I remember, saying that, the government should be doing more and should have been more prepared. And that may be true, but I think the thing that we have to focus the most on is really the huge support from ordinary Poles. Now, whether Poland drew conclusions from that for the future, I should hope so. I mean, it's difficult to predict when something on such a big scale would happen again. But for sure, it showed us that we can, can handle it.
Given Russia's imperialistic ambitions, the threat is always there, unfortunately. Now we have yet more quotes from the UN refugee coordinator for the Ukraine situation in Poland, and he'll be talking about more recent situation. Let's listen.
And if you step back and look at what that has meant over the last several years, Poland has essentially turned a humanitarian crisis into an opportunity whereby Ukrainian refugees have contributed to 2.7% of the gross domestic product of Poland. About 75% of Ukrainian refugees are working here in Poland. They've started an astounding 100,000 businesses since 2022. So on the one hand, you have a situation in Ukraine which is tragic, but on the other hand, this is a story of the strength and resilience of the Ukrainian people and of the human spirit.
Kazimierz, after all these years, which have definitely changed, the landscape of the Polish society, because we have now two major nations living side by side in one country, right? One Ukrainian, one Polish. Would you say that the Ukrainians have already integrated fully into with the Polish society, or are they still, this separate nation of refugees?
Well, it's a difficult question to say with a definite answer. I mean, first of all, there was already a lot of Ukrainians living in Poland before the war. That's something that not a lot of people talk about, that actually, many of these Ukrainian men who were there in the first year of the war were actually there before. And many...
Yes, yeah. But then again, we need to remember that we're talking about the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, while the scrolling invasion of Ukraine started way before that with the annexation of Crimea and fights in Donbas, right?
Exactly. So they have already been part of the Polish society. I guess Poles started to notice them even more when the war broke out. But especially since such big numbers moved through Poland, even if only 1 million of them, I'm saying only, is staying here now. About 4.5 million actually moved through here. So a lot of them then moved to other places in the world. But still, that's a big number of people. In Poland, we have about 38 million Poles living in the country right now, so 1 million is still a big number, especially that most of them live in big cities, so they are noticed there. Now, I would say that they have integrated quite well. They have been given quite a lot of support as well to be introduced for Ukrainian children to be introduced into Polish schools. There were lessons of Polish for these children so they could integrate better. But still, we have a fourth year. I mean, we are entering a fifth year of this war, which is still difficult to believe that such a long time this has been going on. And of course, this creates tensions. And we have seen this in Poland, we have seen this in other countries in Europe, that the presence of Ukrainian refugees is causing a lot of tensions. Tensions which are also fueled by the far-right political parties, for example. In Poland, we have seen this as well. Many far-right political parties actually getting a lot of support on the back of being anti-Ukrainian, saying that these Ukrainian refugees are taking advantage of our country, that they shouldn't be given special treatment. And actually now this has led to a change in legislation. Polish President Karol Nawrocki has recently signed an amendment to the bill which ended special treatment of Ukrainian refugees in Poland. Still, as the UN refugee coordinator has mentioned, Ukrainian refugees have contributed a lot to Polish GDP. So in a sense, Poland has taken this very difficult situation and turned it around into something better, into essentially using these Ukrainian refugees to boost Poland's economy. So there are pros and cons. We have to remember, it's a war going on right now, so it's a difficult situation, especially for these refugees, but also for everyone else.
Yeah, you're talking about the far-right groupings that are somehow exploiting these tensions between Ukrainians and Poles, but in the end, who profits of it the most?
From these tensions, I mean, for sure, Russia. Russia is definitely benefiting from that, and we have actually seen reports of these so-called Russian trolls, meaning special accounts on social media being set up where they are fueling these anti-Ukrainian tensions, where they are saying Ukrainians go home in Polish, but it's all calculated by Moscow to fuel these tensions, to make Poles essentially anti-Ukrainian.
But the Polish society
is not happening. We are still very much
better than that. We are not getting. We won't get fooled. Again, to quote the Who song. Kazimierz Łysiak, TVP World reporter, was our guest today. Thank you very much, Kazimierz. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Maciej.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.